The last of Margaret's coins clinked onto the saloon counter, barely enough for a bowl of watery stew. 3 days since she'd buried Thomas. 3 days since the bank had seized their homestead for debts she never knew existed. The barkeep eyed her wedding ring, the only thing between her and starvation. "That'll get you a week's lodging," he said, reaching for it. Her fingers trembled as she twisted the gold band. Thomas had promised it would protect her. Thomas had lied about many things. Before you continue with Margaret's story, I'd love to ask a favor. Could you take a moment to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on this video? It truly means everything to us and motivates us to bring you more quality stories like this one. Also, I'm curious, where are you listening from today? Let me know in the comments below. "Keep your ring, ma'am." The voice came from behind her, deep and certain as bedrock. Margaret turned to find a man watching from a corner table, broad-shouldered, weathered by sun and wind, with eyes the color of storm clouds. Dust covered his boots, and a worn Stetson sat on the table beside a half-empty whiskey glass. "I don't accept charity," Margaret said, though hunger gnawed at her resolve. "Not offering charity." He stood, revealing his full height, easily over 6 feet of solid muscle, earned from years of wrangling cattle and breaking horses. "I'm offering work. My ranch needs a cook, room, board, and wages." The barkeep snorted. "Cole Bridger, you haven't had a woman at that ranch since—" "Since is done and gone," Cole cut him off, his jaw tightening. He looked back at Margaret. "You know your way around a kitchen?" "I can cook." She lifted her chin, despite the tremor in her voice. "But I won't be anyone's—" "Won't ask you to be." His gaze never wavered, respectful but piercing. "Need someone who can feed a crew of 6 during branding season. That's all." Margaret studied him, the calluses on his hands, the honest exhaustion in his face, the absence of the hunger she'd learned to recognize in men's eyes. Thomas had taught her that lesson too well. "When do I start?" "Now, if you're willing. Ranch is 2 hours north." He placed coins on the counter. "Enough for her meal, and then some. Eat first. You look like you haven't had a decent supper in days." The ride to Bridger Ranch passed in silence, broken only by hoofbeats and the cry of a distant hawk. Margaret sat behind Cole on his massive roan gelding, acutely aware of the strength in his back, the steadiness of his hands on the reins. She hadn't been this close to a man since Thomas, and the memory made her stiffen. "You all right back there?" Cole asked, without turning. "Fine," she lied. "Ranch house is just over this ridge. Crew's out on the range for another few days. So you'll have time to settle before the chaos starts." The ranch sprawled across a valley gilded by the setting sun. A sturdy house of timber and stone, corrals filled with quality horseflesh, and beyond it all, endless grassland, rippling like a golden ocean. It was beautiful in a way that made Margaret's chest ache with something she couldn't name. Cole dismounted and offered his hand. She hesitated before taking it, his palm rough and warm against hers. He released her the moment her feet touched ground, maintaining a respectful distance that Thomas never had. "Kitchen's through there," he said, nodding toward the house. "Pantry stocked. Your room's upstairs, second door on the right. Lock works from the inside." The last detail made her throat tight. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. You haven't met the crew." His mouth quirked in something almost like a smile. "They eat like starved wolves." That first evening, Margaret explored her new domain. The kitchen was well equipped. Cast iron stove, shelves lined with preserves, a proper larder. Her room was simple but clean, with a bed that didn't sag and a window overlooking the valley. She locked the door and wept for the first time since Thomas's funeral. Days fell into rhythm. Margaret woke before dawn to prepare breakfast. Biscuits, bacon, coffee strong enough to strip paint. Cole ate in silence, always thanking her before heading out to work the ranch. He'd return at sunset, covered in dust and horse sweat, to whatever supper she'd prepared. "Best stew I've had in 5 years," he said one evening, sopping up gravy with cornbread. "Your standards must be low. My standards are just fine." He met her gaze across the table. "You're a talented cook, Margaret. Don't sell yourself short." She wasn't used to compliments without conditions attached. "The pantry's running low on flour, and the chickens need—" "Make a list. I'll get supplies in town tomorrow." He paused, fingers wrapped around his coffee cup. "You need anything? Fabric for a new dress, maybe?" Margaret looked down at her worn calico, patched at the elbows. "I can manage." "Didn't ask if you could manage. Asked what you need." The distinction made something crack inside her. "Why are you being kind to me?" Cole was quiet for a long moment. "Because kindness costs nothing and means everything. At least, that's what my mother used to say." He stood, carrying his plate to the wash basin. "Good night, Margaret." 2 weeks later, the crew returned, 5 men weathered by hard labor and harder living. They tracked mud across her clean floors, argued over who got the last biscuit, and regarded Margaret with the wary curiosity of men unused to female company. "Boys, this is Mrs. Whitmore," Cole announced at supper. "She's here to keep you fed, not entertained. Anyone disrespects her answers to me. Clear?" The threat in his voice was subtle but unmistakable. 5 heads nodded in unison. "Yes, boss." "Good. Now eat before it gets cold." As spring turned to summer, Margaret found herself settling into a life she'd never imagined. The work was hard, but honest. The crew, though rough-edged, treated her with cautious respect. And Cole was becoming a problem. Not because he overstepped, he never did, but because she caught herself watching for him at the windows, timing her baking so fresh bread would be ready when he came in from the range. Because her heart stumbled when he smiled at her over morning coffee. Because she was starting to forget Thomas's cruelties in the warmth of Cole's steady kindness. It terrified her. "Teach me to ride," she said one Sunday when the crew had gone to town. Cole looked up from oiling his saddle. "Ride? You've got dozens of horses. I should learn." She crossed her arms. "Unless you think women can't. I think women can do anything they set their minds to." He stood, wiping his hands on his denims. "But riding's dangerous if you don't know what you're doing." "Then teach me not to get killed." Something flickered in his eyes. Approval, maybe, or surprise. "All right, we'll start with Rosie. She's gentle as a lamb." Rosie the mare was indeed gentle, but sitting astride a living creature, 15 hands high, made Margaret's heart race. Cole adjusted the stirrups, his hands careful and impersonal, despite their proximity to her legs. "Sit deep in the saddle, heels down, shoulders back." He demonstrated, moving with the unconscious grace of someone who'd been born on horseback. "Hold the reins like this, firm but not tight. She'll feel your tension." "I'm not tense," Margaret lied, white-knuckling the pommel. "Margaret," Cole's hand covered hers, warm and calloused. "Breathe. Rosie's not going anywhere you don't ask her to." His touch sent heat flooding through her. She jerked away, and Rosie sidestepped nervously. "Easy," Cole murmured, and Margaret wasn't sure if he meant her or the horse. "If this is too much—" "It's not." She forced her spine straight. "I'm ready." They spent an hour walking circuits around the corral. Cole never left her side, his voice a steady current of instruction and encouragement. When Margaret finally managed a trot without bouncing herself breathless, his grin was worth every bruise she'd collect tomorrow. "You're a natural," he said, helping her dismount. Her legs trembled from exertion. She stumbled and Cole caught her, one arm around her waist, solid and sure. For a heartbeat they stood frozen, too close, his storm-gray eyes searching hers. Margaret stepped back, heart hammering. "Supper won't cook itself." "Margaret, wait!" His hand caught her wrist, gentle enough that she could pull away if she wanted. "If I've done something to make you uncomfortable, you haven't." The words came out too fast. That's the problem. She fled to the kitchen before he could ask what she meant. That night, Margaret lay awake, listening to the house settle around her. Somewhere down the hall, Cole was probably asleep, unaware that she was unraveling. She'd sworn after Thomas that she'd never need a man again, never trust one, never. A crash from downstairs shattered her thoughts. Margaret grabbed the fire poker from beside her hearth and crept into the hallway. Moonlight spilled through the windows, painting everything silver and shadow. Another sound. Footsteps, too heavy to be animal. Her door had been locked. Cole had ensured every woman staying in his house could lock her door. But the kitchen window was open. Margaret's breath caught as a figure moved through the darkness below. Not Cole. She'd learned the shape of him over these months. Someone else. "Looking for something valuable, friend?" Cole's voice, cold and sharp as a knife blade. He stepped from the shadows near the stove, rifle in hand. The intruder spun, moonlight catching the gun at his hip. "Just passing through, Bridger. No need for trouble. You're in my house uninvited. That's already trouble." Cole didn't raise the rifle, but the threat hung heavy between them. "Who sent you?" "Nobody sent me." But the lie was obvious in the man's shifting stance. "Heard you had a woman here. Thought maybe she'd like some company." "You thought wrong." Cole's finger moved to the trigger. "You've got 3 seconds to walk out that door." "Cole!" Margaret's voice came from the stairs. Both men looked up at her, standing in her nightgown, with the poker raised like a sword. "I know him." The intruder's face paled. "Maggie." "My name is Margaret." Her voice shook, but didn't break. "And I told you in the church at Thomas's funeral, if you ever came near me again, I'd kill you myself." Cole's eyes narrowed. "Who is he?" "Thomas's brother, Cyrus." She descended the stairs slowly, knuckles white around the poker. "He thinks because Thomas is gone, I'm available." "Is that so?" Cole stepped between Margaret and Cyrus, a wall of controlled fury. "Here's how this works. You're going to leave. If you ever set foot on my land again, if you ever speak her name again, they'll find what's left of you scattered across the prairie. Understood?" Cyrus's hand twitched toward his gun. Cole's rifle came up smooth and fast. "Don't." The single word carried absolute certainty. "You're not fast enough." The standoff stretched taut as a wire. Then Cyrus backed toward the door, hands raised. "She's not worth dying over, Bridger." "No," Cole agreed. "But you're definitely worth killing over. Now get out." The moment Cyrus disappeared into the night, Margaret's knees buckled. Cole caught her before she hit the floor, lowering them both to sit on the stairs. She was shaking so hard, her teeth chattered. "He's gone," Cole said, his arms solid around her shoulders. "I won't let him near you." "You don't understand." Margaret's words came in gasps. "Thomas used to, when he drank, Cyrus was worse. He'd watch and laugh and tell Thomas he should... Stop. Cole's voice cracked like thunder. You don't have to say it. But she did. She'd been carrying it alone for so long, the weight crushing her from the inside. Thomas would hurt me, and Cyrus would say I deserved it for being a bad wife. After the funeral, he said now I could be useful to a real man. Cole was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with barely contained rage. Margaret, look at me. She turned her face toward his, surprised to find his eyes bright with something that might have been tears. You're not property. You're not useful. You're a person, a strong, brave woman who survived hell and came out standing. His hand cupped her cheek with devastating gentleness. And if Cyrus or any man tries to make you less than that, I'll put him in the ground. Margaret had forgotten what it felt like to be defended instead of blamed. The tears came sudden and fierce, years of pain breaking free. Cole held her through it, one hand steady on her back, murmuring wordless comfort until the storm passed. I'm sorry, she said finally, pulling back with embarrassment. Your shirt can be washed. He brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. Don't apologize for having feelings, Margaret. You've earned every one of them. They sat together in the moonlight, the house quiet around them. Margaret's head rested against Cole's shoulder, and for the first time since Thomas died, maybe since before she'd married him, she felt safe. Why do you care? She whispered. I'm nobody. You're not nobody to me. Cole's voice was low, careful, as if he was testing words he'd kept locked away. Haven't been for a while now. Her heart stuttered. Cole, you don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know. He stood, offering his hand. Come on, you should get some rest. Margaret let him lead her upstairs. At her door, he paused. I'll sleep across the hall tonight, in case he comes back. He won't. She surprised herself with the certainty. You scared him too badly. Maybe. Cole's jaw tightened. But I'm staying anyway. She should have argued, should have told him it wasn't proper, wasn't necessary. Instead, she said, thank you. His hand found hers in the darkness, squeezing once before letting go. Lock the door anyway, for my peace of mind. Margaret did, but sleep wouldn't come. She lay listening to Cole settle into the room across the hall, the creak of bed springs, the rustle of blankets. Knowing he was there changed something fundamental in her chest. Like a lock she hadn't known existed, was finally tumbling open. Morning came with the smell of coffee. Margaret descended to find Cole already dressed, brewing a pot on the stove. Couldn't sleep? She asked. Not much. He poured 2 cups, handing her one. I sent word to the sheriff about Cyrus. He'll keep an eye out. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. Cole's gaze was steady over the rim of his cup. I protect what's mine. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning neither was ready to examine. I'm not yours, Margaret said quietly. No. Something raw flickered across his face. But I wish you were. Before she could respond, the sound of horses brought them both to the window. The crew was returning early, riding hard and covered in dust. Cole was out the door before Margaret could blink. Boss! Jake, the youngest hand, nearly fell from his saddle. Gunderson's men cut the fence line up north, drove off 50 head before we could stop them. Cole's face went hard as granite. How many men? 10, maybe 12. They're holed up in the canyon, waiting to see if we're coming. We're coming. Cole strode toward the barn, already planning. Somebody ride to town for the sheriff. The rest of you, load rifles and... No. Everyone turned. Margaret stood in the doorway, flour still dusting her apron. "Those are your cattle," she said. "But if you ride out with guns, some of you won't come back. Maybe all of you. So we let them steal from us?" Cole's voice was sharp with frustration. "Let them think we're too scared to fight? I think you're smart enough to find another way." Margaret crossed her arms. "You've got law on your side. Use it." The crew shifted uncomfortably. Ranch justice was often faster than legal justice, and everyone knew it. But Cole studied Margaret, with something like admiration dawning in his eyes. "You're right," he said finally. "Jake, ride hard for Sheriff Morgan. Tell him we've got rustlers trapped in Dead Horse Canyon. The rest of you, we'll position ourselves to keep them there until the law arrives." It wasn't the answer the crew expected, but Cole's word was final. They mobilized with practiced efficiency, leaving Margaret alone with a house that suddenly felt too large and too quiet. The hours crawled. Margaret tried to work, knead bread until her shoulders ached, scrubbed floors that didn't need scrubbing, mended clothes with stitches too tight. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow looked like bad news riding home. When hoofbeats finally thundered into the yard at sunset, she ran outside, heart in her throat. Cole dismounted slowly, favoring his left side. Blood soaked through his shirt. "It's nothing," he said before she could scream. "Gunderson took a shot when the sheriff moved in. Bullet grazed me, that's all." "That's all?" Margaret was already pulling him toward the house. "You've been bleeding for hours. The crew? All fine. Sheriff's got Gunderson and his men in custody." Cole winced as she pushed him into a chair. "Margaret, really, it's just—" "Take off your shirt." His eyebrows rose. "Pardon? I need to clean that wound before it goes bad. So take off your shirt or I'll cut it off." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, heat, amusement. He unbuttoned slowly, revealing a torso mapped with scars and carved with muscle earned from years of hard labor. The bullet had torn a furrow across his ribs, still oozing blood. Margaret's hands shook as she cleaned the wound with whiskey. Cole hissed through his teeth, but didn't pull away. "You could have died today," she said. "But I didn't." "You could have," her voice cracked. "And I realized sitting here that if you died—" The words stuck in her throat, too dangerous to speak. Cole's hand caught hers, stilling her frantic work. "You'd what?" Margaret looked up, finding his storm-gray eyes fixed on her with an intensity that stole her breath. "I'd regret never telling you that you—" "Go slow," Cole whispered, his free hand cupping her face. "This is important." "I know." She leaned into his touch, heart hammering. "I'm terrified, Cole. After Thomas, I swore I'd never—" "I'm not Thomas." His thumb brushed her cheek. "I'll die before I hurt you. But I need to know, is there any chance you could feel for me what I feel for you?" "I already do." The admission broke something open inside her. "That's what scares me." "Then be scared with me." Cole drew her closer, his breath warm against her forehead. "Be scared and brave and here, Margaret. Just be here." She kissed him. It wasn't planned or graceful, just a desperate need to prove to herself that wanting could be good, that Putch didn't have to hurt. Cole froze for a heartbeat, then kissed her back with a tenderness that made her want to weep. "Margaret," he breathed against her lips. "If this is too much, it's not enough." She pulled him closer, careful of his wound. "Is that wrong? To want you this much when Thomas has been gone barely 4 months?" "No." Cole's hands framed her face, his gaze fierce. "There's no timeline for healing, and that man didn't deserve your mourning anyway." They stayed there in the lamplight, trading kisses that tasted like whiskey and hope. When Margaret finally pulled back to finish bandaging his ribs, Cole caught her hand. "Stay close tonight?" he asked. "I sleep better knowing you're near." So Margaret dragged her chair beside Cole's bed and sat watch while he slept, her hand in his, marveling at how quickly her world had realigned itself around this man who'd offered her work when she'd expected nothing but cruelty. The next weeks passed in a haze of cautious joy. Cole taught Margaret to shoot, his arms around her as he adjusted her stance, his breath in her ear as he murmured instructions. She baked his favorite apple pie and pretended not to notice how his eyes lit up. They sat together on the porch after supper, talking until stars filled the sky. The crew noticed, of course. They'd have to be blind not to see how Cole watched Margaret move through the kitchen, how she smiled differently when he was near. But they kept their thoughts to themselves, recognizing something precious taking root. "Boss is different with her," Jake said one evening, thinking Margaret was out of earshot. "Hasn't seen him this settled since Miss Emily passed." Margaret's hands stilled in the dishwater. Emily. Cole had never mentioned that name. That night, she found him on the porch, staring at nothing. "Who's Emily?" she asked quietly. Cole's jaw tightened. For a long moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "My wife. She died 5 years ago, giving birth to our daughter. Baby didn't make it either." Margaret's heart cracked. "Cole, I'm so sorry. I built this ranch for them." His voice was rough. "Made all these plans for the life we'd have. Then one night, I came home to find the midwife crying and both of them gone." He turned to look at her. "I swore I'd never let anyone that close again. Couldn't survive losing someone else I loved. But here I am," Margaret said. "Here you are." His hand found hers in the darkness, scaring the hell out of me. She understood. Wasn't she equally terrified? "We could stop," she offered. "Keep it professional, employer and employee." "We could." Cole's thumb traced patterns on her palm. "But I don't want to. Neither do I." They sat in silence, both afraid, both hoping. The night burned around them, stars too bright, air too thick with possibility. "Promise you won't disappear tomorrow?" Margaret finally whispered, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at her. "That I won't wake up and find this was all just, I promise." Cole pulled her close, his arms solid and real around her. "I'm not going anywhere, Margaret. Not tomorrow, not ever. Don't make promises you can't keep." "I don't." He tilted her chin up, his eyes reflecting starlight. "I'm here. I'm yours if you'll have me. And I'll spend every day proving it until you believe me." Margaret believed him. Maybe that was the most terrifying thing of all. Summer blazed into autumn. Margaret learned to ride well enough to join Cole on short trips around the ranch. She could hit a target at 20 paces and predict weather from the weight of the air. The crew treated her like family, teasing her about burnt biscuits and defending her honor in town against anyone who dared speak ill of Bridger's woman. But Margaret wasn't Bridger's woman, not officially. Cole had kissed her, held her through nightmares about Thomas, told her things he'd never told anyone. But he hadn't asked for more, and she hadn't offered it. The tension was becoming unbearable. "Do you want me?" she asked one night, bold with frustration. Cole looked up from the ledger he'd been pretending to read. "What?" "You heard me." Margaret crossed the kitchen to stand before him. "We dance around it, but I need to know, do you want me?" "Margaret." His voice was strained. "That's a dangerous question. Then give me a dangerous answer." Cole stood slowly, all 6 feet of controlled power and barely leashed desire. I want you so much it's killing me, but I won't rush you, won't push for something you're not ready to give. What if I'm ready? Her heart hammered. What if I want to try? His hands came up to frame her face, touch achingly gentle, despite the hunger in his eyes. You're sure? No. She was shaking. I'm terrified, but I trust you, Cole. That has to be enough. He kissed her like a man starving, deep and desperate and reverent all at once. Margaret melted into him, months of careful distance dissolving in the heat between them. His hands moved to her waist, pulling her flush against him, and she gasped at the solid strength of his body. Tell me to stop, Cole murmured against her throat. Any time, Margaret. Just say the word. Don't stop. Her fingers tangled in his hair. Please don't stop. He carried her upstairs to his room, their room, if she was brave enough to claim it. Laid her on the bed with a care that made tears prick her eyes. Every touch asked permission. Every kiss promised safety. You're beautiful, Cole whispered, tracing the curve of her cheek. So damn beautiful. Margaret had forgotten what it felt like to be cherished instead of used. When Cole's hands found the buttons of her dress, she didn't flinch. When he pressed kisses to skin Thomas had marked with bruises, she didn't feel shame. Only healing. Only hope. I've got you, Cole promised. I've got you, Margaret. And he did. Through her tears and trembling, through moments when memory made her tense and he immediately stilled, murmuring reassurance. They moved together slowly, learning the language of each other's bodies, building something new from the wreckage of what had come before. Afterward, Margaret lay in Cole's arms, listening to his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. "Marry me," he said into the darkness. She went still. "What?" "Marry me." He shifted to look at her, storm-gray eyes, serious. "Not because you need protection or a home. Because I love you, Margaret Whitmore, and I want everyone to know it." "You love me?" The words felt foreign on her tongue. "Of course I do." He kissed her forehead. "Probably have since the day you stood in that saloon, ready to sell your wedding ring for soup. You're the bravest person I've ever met." "I'm a coward." Tears tracked down her cheeks. "I'm broken and scared and—" "You're a survivor." Cole's thumb brushed away her tears. "You're strong and smart and kind despite everything that bastard did to you. And if you'll let me, I'll spend the rest of my life proving you deserve every good thing this world has to offer." Margaret couldn't speak past the lump in her throat, so she kissed him instead, pouring everything she couldn't say into the press of her lips against his. "Is that a yes?" Cole asked when they finally broke apart. "Yes," she laughed through her tears. "Yes, you ridiculous man." They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in town, with the crew as witnesses and the preacher's wife playing a slightly out-of-tune piano. Margaret wore a simple blue dress Cole had bought her, and flowers Jake had picked from the meadow behind the ranch. It wasn't grand or elegant, but it was real. More real than her first wedding had ever been. "I, Cole Bridger, take you, Margaret Whitmore, to be my wife," Cole said, his voice steady and sure. "I promise to protect you, provide for you, and love you through whatever comes. You're not alone anymore." Margaret's hands shook in his. "I, Margaret Whitmore, take you, Cole Bridger, to be my husband. I promise to stand beside you, support you, and love you even when I'm scared. Together." "Together," Cole agreed. The preacher pronounced them married, and Cole kissed her like he'd been waiting his whole life to do it. The crew whooped and hollered, scandalizing the church ladies. Margaret didn't care. She was home, not in a place, but in the circle of Cole's arms. The autumn after their wedding passed in a blur of happiness Margaret hadn't known existed. Cole taught her to track deer through the hills and identify edible plants. She taught him that talking about Emily didn't betray her memory. They built a life from thousands of small moments. Morning coffee shared in comfortable silence, hands clasped under the dinner table, falling asleep tangled together despite the heat. "I never thought I'd have this," Margaret said one evening, watching sunset paint the valley gold and crimson. Cole's arms tightened around her from behind. "Have what?" "Peace." She leaned back against his chest. With Thomas, every day was survival. Now every day is just living. "You earned this peace," Cole said. "All I did was offer you a place to find it." "You did more than that." She turned in his arms to face him. "You saw a person when everyone else saw a desperate widow. You gave me work when you could have given me charity. You let me be strong instead of trying to make me soft." "You were always strong," Cole said. "I just gave you space to remember it." Winter came early that year, fierce and unforgiving. Blizzards locked the ranch in white silence for days at a time. The crew moved into the bunkhouse, and Margaret cooked enormous meals to keep them fed and warm. Cole checked the livestock twice daily, returning blue-lipped and ice-crusted. "You're gonna catch your death," Margaret scolded, pulling him toward the fire. "Worth it to come home to you." Cole kissed her cold nose. "How are you feeling?" She'd been sick for weeks. Nothing serious, just waves of dizziness and nausea that came and went without pattern. "Fine. It's probably just a winter bug." But it wasn't a bug. When Margaret finally confessed her symptoms to Doc Harrison during his monthly visit to check on the crew, his eyes lit up. "Mrs. Bridger, when was your last monthly?" The question made her freeze. She'd been so busy, so happy, she hadn't noticed. "I don't. October, maybe?" "It's January now." Doc smiled gently. "I'd say you're about 3 months along. Congratulations." Margaret's world tilted. Pregnant. She was pregnant with Cole's child. Joy and terror crashed over her in equal measure. "Does Cole know?" Doc asked. "No." She pressed a hand to her still flat stomach. "I need to tell him." She found Cole in the barn, mending tack by lantern light. He looked up when she entered, smile fading at whatever he saw in her face. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." Margaret's voice shook. "I'm pregnant." Cole went absolutely still. The leather strap slipped from his fingers. "Forgotten. You're..." "About 3 months, Doc says." She twisted her hands together. "I know we haven't talked about children, and after Emily..." Cole crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms with desperate care. "After Emily, I thought I'd never have another chance. But now..." His voice broke. "I'm not made of glass," she snapped after he'd carried her to bed for the 3rd time that week. "I know." Cole sat beside her, hands clasped tight. "But I can't lose you, Margaret. I can't go through that again." "You won't." She took his face between her palms. "I'm strong, remember?" "You told me so." "You're the strongest person I know," Cole said. "Doesn't mean I won't worry." Spring came slowly, coaxing green from the winter-brown hills. Margaret's belly swelled, and the baby kicked hard enough to make Cole laugh with delight every time he felt it. "Fighting like her mother already," he said, hands spread over Margaret's stomach. "Her?" Margaret arched an eyebrow. "Pretty confident." "Call it intuition." Cole kissed her rounded belly. "Hello in there, little one. Your mama and I are waiting to meet you." The baby came in late May during a thunderstorm that shook the house. Doc Harrison had been staying at the ranch for a week, prepared for the moment. Cole paced the hall outside their bedroom, wearing a track in the floorboards, while Margaret labored. "Boss, sit down," Jake begged. "You're making us all nervous." "I can't." Cole ran both hands through his hair. "What if something goes wrong? What if she needs me and I'm out here?" "Mr. Bridger." Doc's head appeared in the doorway. "Your wife is asking for you." Cole was through the door before Doc finished speaking. Margaret lay propped against pillows, sweat-soaked and exhausted, but her eyes lit up when she saw him. "There you are," she said. "Thought you'd run off." "Not a chance." He took her hand, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "How are you?" "In pain," she admitted, "but Doc says we're close." The next hour was the longest of Cole's life. He stayed at Margaret's side, letting her squeeze his hand hard enough to bruise, murmuring encouragement when she screamed with the effort of bringing their child into the world. Then, impossibly, a baby's cry split the air. "It's a girl," Doc announced, placing a squirming, red-faced infant in Margaret's arms. Healthy lungs, all fingers and toes accounted for. Cole stared at his daughter, unable to form words. She was perfect, impossibly small, and already furious at the world, with Margaret's dark hair and what might become his gray eyes. "Hi there, little one," Margaret whispered. "We've been waiting for you." "She's beautiful," Cole managed finally. "You're both beautiful." "Want to hold her?" Margaret asked. Cole took his daughter with shaking hands, marveling at the weight of her. All his terror, all his grief from losing Emily, it didn't disappear, but it shifted, making room for this new, fierce joy. "Welcome home," he told his daughter. "You're safe here. Your mama and I will make sure of it." They named her Emily Rose. Rose for the wild roses that grew in the meadow where Cole had proposed. Emily, to honor the woman who'd come before. The crew doted on her shamelessly. Jake whittled toys, and the others took turns teaching her completely age-inappropriate ranch skills. "She's 3 months old," Margaret protested when she found Cole showing the baby how to hold a rope. "She can't learn to lasso yet." "Never too early to start," Cole said, grinning. Margaret rolled her eyes, but couldn't suppress her smile. This was her life now. Chaos and joy and a love so deep it sometimes scared her. But she was done being scared. 5 years later, Margaret stood on the porch, watching Cole teach 6-year-old Emily Rose and 3-year-old Thomas Jr. how to feed the chickens. Another child, baby Sarah, slept against her shoulder. She'd built a family from the ashes of her past, found love in the last place she'd expected it, and learned that sometimes the best things grew in the hardest soil. "Mama, tell us the story again," Emily demanded later, covered in cookie dough. "About how you and Papa met." "Your father found me when I was lost," Margaret said, the truth simplified for young ears. "And he offered me a home." "Best decision I ever made," Cole added, stealing a cookie from the cooling rack. Margaret swatted his hand. "These are for the children." "I'm just a child at heart." He kissed her flour-dusted nose. "Love you, Mrs. Bridger." "Love you too," she said, "even when you steal cookies." Later that night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Margaret and Cole sat on the porch, watching fireflies dance in the darkness. "Do you ever regret it?" Cole asked. "Taking a chance on a broken-down rancher with too many ghosts?" "Never." Margaret laced her fingers through his. "You gave me more than a home, Cole. You gave me a life worth living." "You did the same for me." He pulled her close. "I love you, Margaret, Then, now, always. Always, she agreed. The night burned with silence around them. Not the terrible silence of loneliness, but the comfortable quiet of two people who'd found exactly what they needed in each other. Above, stars wheeled through endless sky. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight they had this: peace, home, and a love that had survived everything the world threw at them. Together. The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning, 8 years after Margaret had first ridden into Bridger Ranch, with nothing but desperation and a wedding ring. Emily Rose was now 9, Thomas Jr. 6, Sarah 4, and baby Daniel had just celebrated his first birthday. The ranch had prospered under Cole's steady hand and Margaret's fierce management of the household accounts. Margaret was elbow-deep in bread dough when Cole came through the door, his face carved from stone. "What's wrong?" She wiped her hands on her apron, heart already racing. He handed her the telegram without speaking. The words swam before her eyes. Cyrus Whitmore released from prison. Stop. Headed west. Stop. Thought you should know. Stop. Sheriff Morgan. The room tilted. Margaret gripped the counter to steady herself. He was supposed to be in for 10 more years. Good behavior, apparently. Cole's voice was tight with controlled fury. After that night, 8 years ago, when Cyrus had broken into their home, the man had been arrested for attempted assault on another woman in town. The judge had given him 15 years. "I won't let him near you or the children. He'll come here." Margaret's voice was flat with certainty. "He always blamed me for Thomas's failures. Now he'll want revenge." Cole pulled her into his arms, solid and warm despite the fear crackling between them. "Then we'll be ready for him." Over the next week, Cole quietly armed the ranch. Extra rifles appeared in strategic locations. The crew was briefed and put on alert. Margaret taught Emily Rose and Thomas Jr. to recognize danger and run to the safe room Cole had built into the cellar, a precaution she'd once thought paranoid, but now blessed him for. "Mama, why are we practicing hiding?" Emily asked, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Margaret knelt to her daughter's level. "Because sometimes bad people exist, sweetheart. And part of being strong is knowing how to stay safe." "Is someone coming to hurt us?" The directness of the question pierced Margaret's heart. She'd hoped to shield her children from the darkness of her past, but Emily Rose had inherited both her mother's intuition and her father's unflinching gaze. "Maybe," Margaret said honestly. "But your father and I will protect you. That's a promise." Emily Rose nodded solemnly, then hugged her mother with surprising strength. "I'll protect you too, Mama. Papa taught me how to shoot." "You're 8 years old." 9, Emily corrected. "And Papa says I'm a natural." Despite everything, Margaret smiled. Her daughter was indeed a natural, at shooting, riding, and inheriting her father's stubborn courage. It terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Cyrus arrived on a moonless night 2 weeks later. Margaret woke to the sound of breaking glass. Cole was already moving, rifle in hand, positioning himself between their bedroom door and danger. Through the window, she could see fire licking at the barn. "Get the children to the cellar," Cole ordered. "Now." Margaret didn't argue. She ran to Emily Rose's room first, then gathered Thomas Jr. and Sarah. Daniel slept in a sling against her chest as she herded her 3 older children down the stairs. "Is it him?" Emily Rose whispered. "I don't know, baby, but we're going to be safe." Margaret's hand shook as she unlocked the cellar door. "Remember what we practiced." The children filed down into the darkness. Margaret positioned them in the corner farthest from the entrance, behind barrels of preserves that could provide cover if needed. Her rifle, Cole had insisted she keep one, rested across her knees as she waited, every nerve screaming. Above, she heard shouts, gunfire, the acrid smell of smoke drifting through the floorboards. "Mama, I'm scared," Sarah whimpered. "I know, sweetheart." Margaret pulled her close with one arm, keeping the rifle ready with the other. "But we're brave, remember. Bridgers are always brave." Minutes stretched into eternity. Then footsteps on the stairs. Too heavy to be Cole's. Wrong rhythm, wrong weight. Margaret's finger found the trigger. The cellar door crashed open. A man's silhouette filled the frame, backlit by firelight. "Hello, Maggie." Cyrus's voice hadn't changed, still that oily smoothness that had haunted her nightmares. He descended slowly, savoring her fear. "Stay back," Margaret warned, raising the rifle. "I will shoot you." "Will you?" He kept coming. "You couldn't even protect yourself from Thomas. What makes you think you can protect those brats?" Emily Rose gasped. Margaret felt her daughter's hand tighten on her skirt. "They're not brats," Margaret said, voice steady despite her hammering art. "They're my children, and you're not getting near them. Thomas's brother has a right to see his kin. You gave up that right when you tried to assault me." Margaret stood, putting herself between Cyrus and her children. "Last warning. Leave now or I'll put a bullet in you." "You won't shoot," Cyrus sneered. "You're too weak. Always were. That's why Thomas had to—" Margaret pulled the trigger. The shot went wide, deliberately. This was a mother defending her children, and he'd miscalculated badly. "You'll hang for murder," he tried. "Self-defense," Margaret corrected. "You broke into my home, threatened my family. Any jury in the territory would acquit me." She took a step forward, and Cyrus actually retreated. "But I'm going to give you a choice Thomas never gave me. Walk away now, and I'll let you live." "Maggie, my name is Margaret Bridger." Her voice could have cut glass. "And you're done here." The standoff shattered when Cole appeared in the doorway behind Cyrus, rifle pressed to the man's spine. "She told you to leave," Cole said, voice like winter ice. "I'm not as generous as my wife. You've got 3 seconds before I end this." Cyrus's hands went up. Behind him, the crew had arrived, Jake and the others forming a wall of armed, furious cowboys. "Take him to the sheriff," Cole ordered. "Breaking and entering, arson, attempted kidnapping. That should keep him locked up for good this time." As the crew dragged Cyrus away, his voice echoed back. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Margaret said quietly. She was shaking now, adrenaline draining away to leave her hollow. "It's finally over." Cole gathered her and the children close as they emerged from the cellar. The barn was mostly saved. The crew had fought the fire while Cole tracked Cyrus to the house. In the morning light, Margaret could see the damage was minimal. "Mama, you were so brave," Emily Rose breathed, looking at her mother with new eyes. "I was terrified," Margaret admitted. "But being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means protecting what matters despite the fear." "Like Papa says," Thomas Jr. piped up, "courage is doing it anyway." Cole met Margaret's gaze over their children's heads. The look they shared held 8 years of love, partnership, and hard-won peace. "Let's go inside," he said. "I think we could all use some breakfast." 10 years after Cyrus's final arrest, Margaret stood in the town square, watching her daughter graduate from the new teacher's college. Emily Rose was 19 now, poised and confident in a way Margaret had never been at that age. She'd inherited her father's steady courage, and her mother's fierce intelligence. And she was about to become the first certified female teacher in the county. Proud of her? Cole asked, his arm around Margaret's waist. Impossibly. Margaret leaned into him, marveling at how natural it still felt after 18 years of marriage. She's everything I hoped she'd be. Thomas Jr., now 16, stood nearby, trying to look dignified despite his excitement. He'd taken to ranching like he was born to it, already talking about expanding their cattle operations. Sarah, at 14, was currently sweet-talking one of the other ranch owner's sons, using skills her mother definitely hadn't taught her. And Daniel, 11, was probably off somewhere getting into trouble that would require apologizing to someone later. "We did good," Cole said, reading her thoughts as he so often did. "We did," Margaret agreed. The ceremony concluded, and Emily Rose found them in the crowd, diploma clutched proudly. "I did it! You did!" Margaret hugged her daughter tight. "Your father and I are so proud. Couldn't have done it without you both." Emily Rose's eyes shimmered. "Mama, you taught me that women could be strong. Papa taught me that men could be kind. Together you showed me what love should look like." She pulled back, grinning. "Also, I got the teaching position at the new school. The one they just built outside town?" Cole's eyebrows rose. "That's 2 hours away." "I know." Emily Rose lifted her chin, so much like her mother in that moment. "But it's time I made my own way. You taught me how. Now I need to prove I can." Margaret's throat tightened. Her baby was leaving. But wasn't that the whole point? To raise children strong enough to fly? "When do you start?" she managed. 2 weeks. Emily Rose squeezed her mother's hand. "Will you help me pack?" Of course. Those 2 weeks passed too quickly. Margaret helped her daughter sort through belongings, choose which books to bring, make lists of supplies needed. Cole built Emily Rose a custom bookshelf that could be disassembled for travel. Thomas Jr. promised to ride out every week to check on his sister. Even Daniel contributed, gifting Emily Rose his lucky rabbit's foot. The day Emily Rose left, the whole family gathered in the yard to see her off. She looked so young sitting on the wagon seat, but her eyes held the same determination Margaret had seen in the mirror after escaping Thomas all those years ago. "You've got everything?" Margaret asked for the 10th time. "Yes, Mama," Emily Rose smiled. "And if I forgot something, I'll figure it out. You taught me that too." Cole helped his daughter down for one last hug. "You'll do great things, Rosie. We know it." "I love you both," Emily Rose's voice cracked. "Thank you for showing me that family doesn't have to hurt, that love can be safe." Margaret couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. She just held her daughter tight, memorizing the moment, the feel of Emily's hair, the scent of the lavender soap she preferred, the strength in her embrace. Then Emily Rose climbed back onto the wagon, gathered the reins, and drove away toward her future. Margaret watched until the dust settled and the road was empty. "She'll be fine," Cole said quietly. "I know." Margaret turned into his chest, letting herself cry. "But I miss her already." "That's because you're a good mother." Cole's arms tightened around her. "She's strong because you taught her how. Everything she is, she learned from watching you survive and thrive." That night, the house felt too quiet without Emily Rose's chatter. Margaret found herself wandering to her daughter's empty room, sitting on the bed, touching things left behind. A hair ribbon, a favorite book, a sketch Emily had drawn of the family years ago. "She used to fit in my arms," Margaret said when Cole found her there. "Now she's teaching children of her own." Time's funny that way. Cole sat beside her, their shoulders touching. Feels like yesterday you walked into that saloon with nothing but pride and a wedding ring. Now look at us, 4 children, a thriving ranch, a life neither of us imagined possible. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't offered me that job? Margaret asked. Every day. Cole took her hand, tracing the faded scar on her palm, a burn from her first week in his kitchen, clumsy and desperate. I thank God I was in that saloon, that I saw you, that I was smart enough to recognize something worth keeping. I wasn't worth much then, Margaret said softly. You were worth everything. Cole turned to face her fully. You just didn't know it yet. But I did. And I spent 18 years proving it to you. You did. She kissed him, slow and sweet. Every single day. 25 years after Margaret first arrived at Bridger Ranch, she sat in a rocking chair on the porch, watching the sun set over land that now felt as much a part of her as her own heartbeat. Cole sat beside her, gray threading his dark hair, lines deeper around his eyes, but still the man who'd offered her dignity when she had nothing else. Letter came from Emily Rose today, Margaret said, unfolding the paper. She's engaged. To that banker's son? Cole's tone suggested what he thought of bankers' sons. The same. Margaret smiled. She says he's kind, respectful, and makes her laugh. That's all I ever wanted for her. She learned to choose better than we did the first time around, Cole said wryly. Than I did, Margaret corrected. You chose perfectly. Oh, I got lucky. He reached for her hand, and she gave it willingly. These days, his grip wasn't quite as strong. Arthritis had settled into his knuckles, but the intention was unchanged. Think we'll make it to the wedding? Cole Bridger, we're 63, not dead. Margaret squeezed back. We'll dance at our daughter's wedding if I have to carry you there myself. He laughed, the sound still capable of warming her from the inside out. I believe you would. Thomas Jr. ran the ranch now, with Sarah's husband as his partner. Daniel was off making his fortune in the railroad business, sending letters full of adventure and optimism. The grandchildren, 7 so far, treated the ranch as their playground, filling it with noise and chaos and joy. We did all right, Cole said, apropos of nothing. We did better than all right. Margaret leaned her head on his shoulder. We built something beautiful from broken pieces. You built it, Cole insisted. I just gave you space to work. We built it together, Margaret said firmly. That's how all the best things happen. Together. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from gold to pink to purple. Somewhere in the house, their grandchildren were probably causing havoc. Thomas Jr. and his wife were likely finishing evening chores. The world kept turning, seasons kept changing, but this moment of peace with the man she loved remained constant. Do you remember that first night? Margaret asked. When I asked you to promise you wouldn't disappear? Every detail. Cole's thumb traced patterns on her palm. You were terrified I'd turn out to be another nightmare. And instead, you turned out to be the dream I didn't know I was allowed to have. She turned to look at him, seeing past the gray hair and weathered skin to the man who'd saved her by offering work instead of pity. I love you, Cole Bridger. Then, now, always. Always, he echoed, pulling her close. As stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Margaret reflected on the improbable journey of her life, from desperate widow to beloved wife, from victim to survivor to thriver, from broken to whole. It hadn't been easy. There'd been setbacks and scares, moments when the past threatened to pull her under. But she'd learned something crucial in these 25 years. Happiness wasn't something that happened to you. It was something you built, day by day, choice by choice, with someone who saw your worth even when you couldn't. "What are you thinking about?" Cole asked. "How lucky I am," Margaret said, "and how grateful." "For what?" "For a man who looked at a desperate widow and saw a person worth saving. For a life built on respect and partnership. For children who never knew what it meant to fear their parents. For growing old beside someone who still makes my heart race." She kissed his weathered cheek. "For you, Cole, always for you." He didn't answer with words. He didn't need to. The way he held her said everything. A promise kept, a love sustained, a life well lived together. Emily Rose's wedding took place on a perfect September afternoon, with the whole territory seemingly in attendance. She looked radiant in a dress Margaret had spent months sewing, her face glowing with the same happiness Margaret had discovered all those years ago. "You ready to give me away, Papa?" Emily asked as they prepared to walk down the aisle. "Never," Cole said gruffly. "But I'm ready to trust you to choose well. And you did, Rosie. He's a good man." "He is." Emily Rose adjusted her father's tie. "You set the standard pretty high, you know. Not every girl grows up watching her father treat her mother like a queen." "Your mother's the queen," Cole corrected. "I'm just the lucky man who got to serve her." Margaret, overhearing from nearby, felt tears prick her eyes. After all these years, he could still make her feel cherished with a simple sentence. The ceremony was beautiful. Emily Rose's fiancé, Jonathan, a genuinely kind young man who looked at her daughter the way Cole had once looked at Margaret, promised to honor and respect his bride. The vows spoke of partnership, not ownership, of supporting each other's dreams, not limiting them. "Do you take this man to be your husband?" the preacher asked. "I do," Emily Rose said clearly. "Together." Margaret's breath caught. It was the word she and Cole had claimed as their own, passed now to the next generation like a blessing. At the reception, Cole pulled Margaret onto the dance floor, despite his protesting knees. They moved slowly, decades of practice making them perfectly synchronized. "Think back to that night I found you in the saloon," Cole said. "Would you have believed this was possible?" "Not in a million years," Margaret admitted. "I thought my life was over, that I'd never be anything but broken. And now? Now I know that broken things can heal stronger than they were before." She looked around at their family, children dancing, grandchildren playing, a community they'd helped build. "We made something beautiful, Cole. Something that will outlast us. That's the point, isn't it?" Cole kissed her forehead. "Building something that keeps growing after we're gone. Love that echoes forward." As the sun set on Emily Rose's wedding day, Margaret found herself back on that familiar porch with Cole beside her. The house behind them rang with celebration, music and laughter and joy. Their children were grown, their grandchildren thriving, their legacy secure. "Do you have any regrets?" Cole asked. Margaret thought about it seriously. "Only one. That Thomas's cruelty stole years I could have spent being happy. But then I wouldn't have ended up here, with you, building this life. So maybe not even that." "Margaret Bridger, you're the most remarkable woman I've ever known," Cole said, "and I'm the luckiest man alive." "We're both lucky," Margaret corrected. "Lucky we found each other. Lucky we were brave enough to try. Lucky that love turned out to be bigger than fear. They sat together as the party continued without them, content in the quiet that came from decades of companionship. The night burned with silence around them. Not empty silence, but the full, rich quiet of two people who'd said everything that mattered and were comfortable just being. "Promise you'll still be here tomorrow?" Margaret asked, echoing that question from so many years ago. Cole's answer was the same as it had always been. "I promise. Not just tomorrow, Margaret, for as long as we both shall live. And beyond," she added softly. "And beyond," he agreed. They were old now, their bodies wearing the marks of time and hard work. But their love, that remained young and vital, renewed daily by small kindnesses and large devotions. They'd built something that would outlast them both, a family that knew love didn't have to hurt, a ranch that provided for generations, a story that proved broken people could heal and thrive together. As stars filled the endless western sky, Margaret leaned against Cole and let herself feel the fullness of her contentment. She'd survived hell and found heaven on the other side. She'd learned that strength came in many forms, some loud and defiant, others quiet and enduring. She discovered that the best love was built slowly, carefully, with patience and respect as its foundation. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Cole answered. "Then, now, always." "Always," Margaret agreed. And in that moment, under the vast Montana sky, surrounded by the family they'd built and the life they'd created, Margaret Bridger knew something profound. She'd kept the promise she'd made to herself all those years ago when she was desperate and alone. She'd survived. She'd thrived. She'd found her way home. And it had been worth every difficult step of the journey. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the Front Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Margaret and Cole's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.